So this week's video blog is actually inspired by something I saw on the radio saw on the television this morning, which was a lady called Molly King, who's a broadcaster, and she was talking about her own dyslexia and the importance of people being assessed for dyslexia so that they can overcome it, and they have strategies and so on. She herself was diagnosed with dyslexia when she was 10. I waited until I was 50 something, 55 I think it was, before I was diagnosed. I thought I was a bit dyslexic, found out more about it when I was assessed, and it's a big deal. But it wasn't just about that. She mentioned something specific that made me think about my own dyslexia, which was the anxiety she had when they used to read around the class. So reading a story and everyone would read a bit. That just took me straight back to being in school. It was a huge anxiety for me. I've said it before, I would count on the paragraphs. So there's going to be 10 people reading before me, count 10 paragraphs, that's likely to be mine. Read that one, the one before, the one after. Practice, 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 hear your name, read the bit you've got to do. If you start reading the wrong one, say, oh sorry, which one? The teacher will then tell you the first few words, you go to the right paragraph, you read it. Then you stop, the next person reads. What's actually happened is you've taken in none of the information for those first 10 paragraphs because you're just concentrating on your own. You've read your own, which is not about the meaning, it's about being able to recite it. Then afterwards your heart's doing this, palpitations, and so you miss the next few paragraphs. So you basically don't get to understand what the story is about, which is very frustrating, as well as lots of stress and anxiety. So that made me think. But the other thing is this book, which is called The Illustrated Guide to Dyslexia and Its Amazing People. So I'll hold it up again. Really worth getting. I got my copy just last week when I was recommended it by somebody, and I got one of their other books. But this one is the one I want to talk about today, because what I've done is I've taken a few things from it that actually relate very well to me. So I'm going to start by just showing a picture, because it says about people thinking in pictures when they're dyslexic. So I love this page. It shows how people who are regular thinkers, they would just go straight from A to B. People who are dyslexic sort of go all over the place to get where they are. It's sort of like information is bouncing around, but what that means is you can get some amazing ideas. And I just thought, yeah, that's me. I'm definitely not that. I'm definitely the all over the place one. So I thought that was pretty good. So I wanted to share that. But also it starts, one of the very early things it says is that often, all dyslexics are different, but a lot of us think in pictures. And I thought, wow, that is so true. And it goes beyond that. It's thinking with all your senses. So one smell just evokes a whole load of pictures in my head, a whole load of images, a whole load of memories, a sound, a taste, anything. But senses work for a lot of people in terms of memory prompts, and for dyslexics it's quite often not just the memory prompts but also the way we actually think about things. So thinking in pictures is an important one. One of the early things it mentions in the book is about dyslexics appearing to just be in their own little world. And I'm thinking about myself, and at times I would appear to be in my own little world when actually I wasn't. I was focusing, but I was processing the information and having to sort of cherry pick the ideas and sort them all out and put them into the right order, because they were all like that picture bouncing around in my head. I needed to get a grip on it. So I might be looking out the window, or I might be doodling, that's a big one for me, or I might be fidgeting. So I might have one of my famous fidget strings, which I've talked about before, which just help me to just concentrate. I might be fidgeting with a little object, like you can get these fidget cubes or one of these little fidget dice. It's not fidget dice, it's a real dice, but it's a weird angled one, so it just feels really nice. I might be doing that to actually help me to think. So that's quite important. The other thing is sometimes I would be off in my own world, because the pace of the conversation, bringing in new information that totally new to me, was so fast that I couldn't sort it all out, so I went off and thought about something else. So looking out there, because actually blah blah blah, work something else out in my mind, because if you're going to be one step behind all the time, sometimes that's just exhausting. Switch off, do your own thing. So it could be that you're switched off, but it could be that you're actually working with that information and processing. So just like I was showing the fidget string and the dice that I fidget with, sometimes having something tangible can help with memory. So with numbers, holding down, I mean, there's the 9 times table where you hold down the number 1 and you've got 9 fingers, so 1, 9 is 9. You hold down the second finger and you've got 18. The third finger, you've got 27. So a good way of remembering your 9 times table. But also, if I've got to remember more than a couple of numbers, I'll quite often hold down the number of fingers to remind me of part of that sum, so that as I'm trying to do that mental arithmetic, I've got something concrete, because I can't hold all of that in my head. So in the same way as finding it hard to hold that in my head, holding a set of instructions can just be too much to hold in my head. So I've got my phone with me always. Before that, there were other electronic devices, always something to be prompting me to keep my memory going. And then having, so if you've got a list of things to do, either write it as a list so you can tick things off and you don't forget the next thing. Or if somebody is giving sort of oral instructions, then one at a time, if you give me 3 instructions, by the time I've completed number 1, I've forgotten 2 and 3. So slow it down, break it down, chunk the information so that you've got enough to manage, to cope, to do, and then you can check what comes next. But a bombardment of information does not help a dyslexic, so just to be aware of that. Another thing is about reading. So I've been using an e-reader a lot. I use a Kindle, and I actually went to the expense, and it is an expense, of their latest one, because you can change not just the brightness of the font, but you can actually change the colour tone of not the font, the page. You can actually change the colour tone of the page, and that softens it, so you haven't got this black on white, which can really give you eye strain, especially if you get eye stress, if you're visual stress, and it goes a lot with dyslexics who are struggling with the reading anyway. So the added visual stress is just one thing too much. Not always, sometimes it's fine, but I don't. I mean, look here, I've got my notes for what I'm talking about. I haven't used fully white paper. It's an off-white paper, and I haven't used black ink. I avoid black on white because that is the biggest contrast. So we try to avoid that. So thinking about the colour, if you've got a whiteboard, if you're a teacher and you've got a whiteboard up, change the background. It just reduces the eye stress, the visual stress, and that really helps with keeping the letters still, the words still. It stops them sort of swirling or just becoming fuzzy, and it helps you to keep your place on the page. So it's a really, really useful, simple thing you can do that will help anyone who's dyslexic. So another thing that is a sign of, a sure sign somebody's dyslexic is when they've got this amazing vocabulary. I've got a pretty amazing vocabulary, but their written work doesn't reflect that. Now, I use software. I use Dragon Naturally Speaking as a voice recognition software package, and when I'm having a really dyslexic day, I will use my voice recognition software so that I can use the vocabulary I want to. I would not have got my doctorate without Dragon Naturally Speaking, because there were days when my typing was just sheer gobbledygook, and by having the software, I was able to just dictate and use the words, the vocabulary that was appropriate for that level of academic writing. Things like, I don't often, if I'm handwriting, I won't use the word apologise, I will write the word sorry. I might want to use more, words like scintillating, gregarious, things like that. I'm likely to say sparkly or fun. because it's easier to spell. So looking at a mismatch between written language and spoken language is an important thing to think about. So the changing the vocabulary, dumbing down the vocabulary. I always tell my students not to do that. I'm focused on their quality of work, and I'm guilty of it myself, if I'm honest. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, I've done that. I still do. Been doing that for years. Another thing to think about is how you can lose the meaning. You know, I have to read things. If I need to know the meaning, I have to read it normally about 4 times to get meaning from it. Unless it's a sort of trashy novel, in which case the meaning's not going to be hard to grasp and I'll get there. But I read it first to decode it. I so often read the same page over and over, and I'm like, I think I've read it. I don't even know if I've read it sometimes. I really, honestly, there are times when I read a page and I have no recognition of having read it, because when I read it the first time, all I was doing was decoding the words. I wasn't taking in any meaning whatsoever. So it's really important to, again, as a teacher, think about when a child is reading fluently, that doesn't necessarily mean they're understanding what they're reading. So we need to check for comprehension. That's really important, because it can easily be lost, the focus being on decoding the words. That's also, by the way, quite often true with children who are having English as their second language. So quite often, EAL, as we often call them, children will very, very easily read the passage, but they haven't got either the whole meaning or the nuanced meaning, and sometimes they haven't got any of the meaning. So we do need to consider these things. Okay, another point, this is a real great one. We know about the left and right. Quite often dyslexics get left and right confused. There's also B and D, which, you know, you do the sort of big dog, you do the making the shape of the word, the shape of a bed. So the B comes before the D, bed, and it helps you remember. We have to be careful though, because there's so I used to think that if you had the letter P and the letter B confused, oh, that's a sign of orientation. It might be, but it could also be a hearing issue, because when I did cued articulation, I learned that some letters are formed using the same, they're the same formation, but one is voiced and one isn't. So K and G are made in the same way, the same part of your throat. K is not voiced, G is voiced. So P and B are the same. P, B. They're made in the same way, blowing air through your lips. B, P, B, P. But for the letter B, B, you're actually using your vocal cords. So B. You can tell by putting your fingers against your throat when you say it. If you do a letter P sound, P, there's no vibration here. But if you do a letter B sound, B, you can feel it here. So it could be a sign of a hearing issue rather than the orientation, so you need to consider it. For me, one of the ones that I still get confused with, if we're doing the wooden letters, the alphabet letters, putting them in order, when the students are doing it, I don't know whether the J is the right way round or the Z or the N. They're the ones, if they're capital letters, they blow my fuses. So I actually have to, on my hand, I write my son's name, Joe, and then I know which way round the J is meant to go, and I compare it to the J on the desk. But I don't actually know which way round is correct. S's and Z's can confuse me because they're actually very similar. And again, I write Sam's name, one of my sons, and that helps me. Luckily, I also have a Zach. I didn't name my children for these reasons, but Zach helps me. I write his name, then I can check. That would be Zach. Oh, right, that's the right way round, or it's the wrong way round. The letter N just blows my fuses, and I don't have an easy one for that. I don't have a name to help me with it. But yes, it's not just the obvious B's, P's and D's. It can also be, as I say, for me, J is a real biggie. So quite a few of them. So orientation, but also it can be the direction of the letter, the orientation of the letter, But it can also be the sequence of the letter, so the order of the letters in the words. I'm just as likely to do H, T, E as T, H, E when I'm writing. I don't necessarily get the letters in the right order. Sometimes you can get away with it. Other times it can really make a difference between the meaning. Okay, so they're things to just be on the lookout for as a teacher, and we need to find our strategies, as I said with my writing the kids' names. That's one of my strategies for checking these things. And so tying in with that is handwriting. My natural handwriting is appalling. I mean, if anyone wants to look at my notes and see that on the video, it is appalling. For me, it stems from two things. One is, I think, because of concentrating so hard, I used to get handache writing as a child. I used to be forever sort of shaking my hand out and finding it really hard to write. But also I was disguising the spelling errors by writing untidily, or hoping to disguise the spelling errors. It didn't always work out that way. So handwriting is another thing. I've mentioned before malapropisms, so park arc instead of car park, the Pacific Ocean instead of the Pacific Ocean. So getting words sort of, it's that sort of jumble of the sounds and the letters, and they sort of stick in the wrong order sometimes in your head. So these are things to be aware of, just in the same way as when you want something and you say, oh, I need the what's it. I always forget the name for the thing that turns the overhead projector on and off, and I just started calling it a shusher because I use it to shush the thing off. And so the kids at school knew when I said, oh, does anyone know where the shusher is? They all knew what the shusher was because it's what I always called it. Couldn't think of its real name. It didn't matter. I found a name that worked and made sense to me. There was a logic to it. So thingy, what's it, shusher, whatever it happens to be. There are often ways we find to get around these things. So I mentioned before I need reminders. So my phone has been a reminder. So for example, when I was at school, I had a sort of little tablet thing that I used for taking notes on, but I also used it as a reminder. So I would set alarms, so I could be asked to do a cover lesson, which might only be in half an hour's time. If I didn't set a reminder, I wouldn't turn up for my cover lesson. I wouldn't be deliberate, I'd be distracted and I wouldn't remember, and then I'd remember it maybe half an hour later. I couldn't remember my timetable for the entire year. I always needed to check every single day and throughout the day what my next lesson was. And that's as a teacher, let alone what I was like as a child. It was great. I just followed the rest of my class. I knew who was in each, who was with me for, there were certain people who were with me for every lesson. Just go where they are, easy. As a teacher, I need to check, I had timetables on my, inside of my planner, on my wall, everywhere. I could just check it. Had it on my tablet, so I could be walking around and I could just check where I was meant to be. Those are the sorts of organisational things. So what are your prompts? What are you going to use to support that particular struggle? Another thing they mentioned in here, which was interesting in this book, I'll hold it up again, was the idea of getting started on work. And this is something I've always struggled with. And what I found helped, and it sounds really simple, but writing the title, having a blank page can be quite daunting for somebody who's dyslexic, and stress affects it. So if you're having a day when you're stressed, it is likely that you will show more of the signs of dyslexia. However, it's not all doom and gloom. So for example, you can find really creative solutions. I think because I'm dyslexic, I've been a good Senko. I've been told I'm a good Senko. I know I'm a good Senko. It's something I do well. And part of that is because I struggle myself, so I'm good at finding solutions for others. And just want to finish by reading this particular page, just holding it up so you can see it. And it basically just says how your grown-up can help you beat dyslexia. So it mentions reading, being read to really helps. So it helps foster that love of books. And talking about the book is really important, because that helps you to know that they've understood it. It helps with understanding. Being aware of tricky words, pointing them out. Get praising, but praise the effort and praise specific things. Not general, "Oh, you're good." You're good doesn't work for a dyslexic. If you've got low self-esteem, as I had in terms of my abilities for a long time, then being told I was good was not helpful. Being told why I was good. So targeted, deserved praise. Reading every day is a really important thing. Reading out loud every day. Practice, 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 but keeping those stories up. But also that praise, that anything that will raise the self-esteem. Self-esteem is a huge issue for anybody with any struggle. So this has been a longer video than usual, but hopefully it's helpful. Thank you very much.